14th, which was Valentine's Day, and we had a young couple that had decided to come along to a public meeting for their date night on Valentine's evening. We thought that was fantastic. So tonight, I'm going to ask, is anyone celebrating, be honest, a birthday tonight? Now the odds are, for almost 365, come on, I can't see it. Has anyone got their hand up? Is anyone celebrating a birthday tonight? Yes. Oh, fantastic. Where's this? Really? Yes. Put your arm up. What's your name, sir?
Dave.
Dave? Can't believe you're 21 and you come along to a public meeting. So Dave, it's wonderful to have you here. And as is whenever I share a community board meeting, now I can tell you what, a box of roses isn't going to go far between 4,000 people, so I know it's going to cause a bit of a bun fight. So I've got 2 boxes and you're going to have to choose your favourite friends, okay? And don't be that guy in the cinema that's always unwrapping the wrappers. Oh no, I knew this would end bit. I knew this would. Okay, where's where's Cody or Lyle? You can go and take one up to the top. What's the person's name at the top? Lyndall. And the John, was it? Funny that, Dave. It's just making sure everyone else is checked in. And you know that really awkward moment when you're having a romantic dinner for your birthday in the restaurant and the waiter brings the cake out with the single candle and you go, oh, a bit awkward. Happy birthday, Lyndall and Dave, and then the whole restaurant sings, and there's 8 of them. Well, you've got 4,000 people singing tonight. Let's start. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear. Happy birthday to you. Right, enough of the frivolities. Who's concerned about the provision of healthcare in the Central Otago Upper Clutha region? Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. I've received over 70 questions in advance, and I will endeavour to weave most of those into the session this evening, the conversation. If you'd like to add to those questions, we have a quick fire session towards the end, and you're welcome to signal to either Lyle over there and Cody, who should be over here in the high vest. There is a form that you can fill out to put your name and your question there. Keep your questions short. I'll receive those towards the end and then we'll do a quick fire response. That's your way to contribute tonight if you'd like a question asked. It goes without saying that we ask everyone to be courteous and respectful to each other this evening. So let's get into it and introduce the panel. I'll allow them to introduce themselves. We'll start with you, Jono, and just a very brief introduction as we go along the line.
You told me how to turn the mic on.
You went to 7 years of medical school.
Is it on?
That is.
Kia ora koutou, I'm Jono Wills. I'm the Clinical Director at Dunstan Hospital. Previously worked as a GP and continue to live in the community up here.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko David Gautoko Ingoa, so I'm the Chief Medical Officer here in the Southern District. So I'm a neurologist by trade. I still work clinically, and I've been lucky enough to be in this role for the last 18 months. So thanks very much everyone for coming along this evening.
Yeah, and David is a Liverpool Football Club supporter. Yes!
Don't mention Manchester United.
Yeah.
I'm Dr. Fiona McLean. I'm a specialist GP and director at Aspiring Medical Centre here in Wānaka, and I've lived here in Wānaka for almost 12 years and worked at Aspiring for coming up 10. I feel passionately, like you all do, about healthcare in the area, particularly some of the inequity regarding funding to our patients in Wānaka.
Thank you, Fiona. And Fiona cleaned up at the AMP show on a horse, if you might have seen. You can't get into her medical practice now because of all the red ribbons.
Kia ora koutou. My name is Hamish Brown. I'm the Group Director of Operations for Health New Zealand Southern, so the old former Southern District. I look after hospital and specialist services across that region. Originally trained as a nurse, I spent most of my clinical career in the emergency department. But yeah, thanks again for the opportunity to come here.
Yes, thank you.
Good evening, my name is David Bailey. I'm the St John Ambulance Area Operations Manager for Central Otago. I have lived in this community for 7 years now. I'm a registered paramedic and have worked in the ambulance sector for 24 years.
Yeah, it's great to see you, David, and thank you to everyone. I appreciate, particularly Hamish and David, you've travelled from Dunedin, Oti Dunedin, so thank you, and David B, you've come from Cromwell today. Okay, the first topic, 1 of 8, that we're going to cover tonight is urgent and after-hour care. So Fiona, can you just talk me through the availability of medical care from, say, 8 a.m. in the morning to 6 p.m?
Yep, sure. So both Wānaka and Aspiring Medical Centre are open from 8:30 till 6 and 9 to 6 at the weekends. Need to just be really clear of the fact there's always an urgent care team that looks after people with on-the-day emergencies and problems. Between 6 and 11, if you get really, really sick or really, really injured, then you call 111. And then there are other options such as Plunket Line, if it's concerned about child illness, emergency psychiatric services via Dunedin Hospital. There's also a telemedicine option that runs after hours called Ka Ora. And if you were thinking that you didn't necessarily need an ambulance, but you felt you needed to be seen, then you call the medical centre and you're put through to a nurse triage service, and that nurse will either be able to reassure you, give advice, or call an ambulance on your behalf, or they'll speak to the on-call doctor, and that doctor works from their home till 11 o'clock at night.
Okay, and Fiona, what happens after 11? So I understand all these. What happens physically in Wānaka and Upper Clutha after 11 p.m? What happens if someone has a challenging medical situation?
All the same phone options, as I've mentioned. The only difference is there isn't an after-hours doctor based in Wānaka after 11 o'clock. We know that we see the majority of after-hours presentations between 6 and 11. There's very few that actually get over to either Dunstan or Queenstown Lakes. There's probably 3 to 4 a week. But we're really aware that that is a gap, and it's not an acceptable gap, and that's something that we're working to discuss.
So David, can you explain, David Bailey, what would happen in the evening, wake up at 2 a.m, daughter's suffering from really challenging respiratory condition, and the ambulance happens to be taking another patient to Dunstan Hospital at that time?
Thank you, Simon. So I'm going to talk about this from two sides of, I guess, triage. So in the event that patient was relatively stable, our team that are based in Christchurch and Auckland, we have a clinical team there that could assess that patient over the phone and make some decisions about what care was needed. In an emergency sense, we have a number of internal resources and external resources we rely on. So we would send the Wānaka First Response Unit that is crewed by fantastic volunteers here locally in Wānaka who are focused on their community. We would send the closest available ambulance. Someone like myself may respond in a rapid response car. Up from Cromwell. Yeah, totally. We've got Prime, so both Aspiring Medical Centre and Wānaka Medical Centre have a Prime contract. That's doctors, registered nurses, nurse practitioners who can respond to support the ambulance service. If it's a cardiac arrest, we would also ask help from feds to attend.
Let me bring Jonathan in here. Jonathan, how does this compare, this sort of after hours post 11 p.m. service, compared to other towns of a similar size or even maybe larger in Aotearoa, New Zealand?
The Wānaka after hours beyond 11 p.m. situation is what keeps me up at night, and I think your original question was, what do you do if a child is sick at that stage, and if they're seriously ill, you call David and he comes and saves the day. And look, that's what they're very good at. The thing that completely worries me is what is the second line, where is the redundancy in the system? Any redundancy is either via telehealth or coming from another town. And I'm the one up in the middle of the night picking up the pieces, and it scares me.
You're up because you're picking up the pieces because I'm on shift. I'm the one awake in the middle of the night down at Dunstan Hospital. Yep. Comparative towns, I've gone through the list of populations in New Zealand. The ones of similar size, you're looking at places like Levin and Waikanai, the only towns of similar size, slightly bigger, slightly smaller, that are a distance from healthcare. Those two towns are 40 minutes and they're from a base hospital. So from a city with major resources. There is no town of similar size to Wānaka
that is a equal distance from a small hospital.
Is there anything else you'd like to share before I throw it over to Te Whatuora? Is there anything else you wanted to add to that, or you've set the scene?
I think I've set the scene for now.
Fantastic. David Piau, Chief Medical Officer, Te Whatuora Southern. Has the risk in the system here in Ngāpuhi been recognised at a governance level within the health system?
Yeah, I think that it's been really clear to the whole system that one of the unique features of the Southern District is the large geographical area and the distributed populations. Now, of course, what has clearly happened in the Upper Clutha region has been a large increase in the population, and that risk has been noted through our formal risk processes. We have a clinical council where we look at all the risks within the system. That feeds into our senior leadership team. And also, from a personal perspective, it's been very clearly communicated to me to pass on to the system from my conversations with Jono and his colleagues, also our colleagues in primary care. But most clearly perhaps through the Community Health Council, where we've got representatives from this area of our district, who again clearly talked about their lived experiences. So yeah, absolutely, it has been picked up at a governance level.
Hamish, let me bring you in. Where's our closest emergency department?
Well, the closest emergency department that's operated by Health New Zealand is in Queenstown, at Frankton, at Lakes Hospital. They're seeing around 15,000 presentations there and across the last year. They've got reasonable facilities there in terms of diagnostics, both plain radiology and CT. Dunstan Hospital, and this is where some of the complexity comes in, is funded for some emergency presentations.
So, John, is there an emergency? Do you run an emergency ED at Dunstan?
So no, we do not have.
So who's pocketing the money, John?
Me.
I'm sure that's not the case, but we continue.
Yeah, look, there is not an emergency department at Dunstan, and that was a decision made historically over 20 years ago, and was an entirely reasonable decision at the time. I disagree with the decision to try and close down community hospitals, but the communities fought back and kept their hospital, but there were limited funds, and we had to decide what could be delivered with the amount of money that was delivered to run Dunstan Hospital.
Hamish, is it fair that we live in Wānaka and we have on a bad night, an hour 30, hour 20 drive to our closest ED?
Look, I think we'd like to improve on that situation, and I think we'd be looking at equity across the system to make sure that there's processes and pathways in there that people can receive the care they need when they need it.
David Bailey. Look, I have had some feedback in the community that they're really concerned about the amount of pressure that St John is under, and you are seem to be the Johnny on the spot, last chance, sort of, I'll throw a few other cliches in there. I mean, there just seems to be a lot of pressure. I mean, are you concerned about delivering that required level of service provision?
So, as an organisation, we're comfortable with the service that we have here in Wānaka. It's over and above what we're funded here for. We have a 24/7 paramedic ambulance based here, and 50% of the time, that vehicle doesn't actually leave Wānaka.
Okay. Fiona, why aren't the GPs filling the gap? Why, why isn't primary care, general practitioners, filling that urgent care gap?
Something we've tried so hard to do ever since I've been here, so that's 12 years, and I know my colleagues here tonight would say that it's been going on a lot longer than that, and we've sat around and discussed it. Interestingly, money is not a factor in it. When you talk to the clinicians who work after hours, there's common themes that come out. One theme that we keep hearing is our day jobs are undoubtedly getting harder. They're more complex, the needs are higher, and our patients deserve us to be on the top of our game. It's very hard to expect staff to work a day shift and be good doctors, and then work a night shift, and then work another day shift. It's just not safe for patients. The other themes that come up is burnout. We don't want to burn out our staff. We need to keep them. We need to retain staff, and we want our staff to be happy to work here. And vulnerability is another another thing people mention, and by that I mean there's the clinical vulnerability. You don't know what you're going to be called out to at 2 in the morning. You don't know what you might meet at the medical centre. It can feel really overwhelming, and you wonder how are you going to do it. You've only got 2 hands, and I think all of us that have worked after hours have been in those situations where you might be suturing a wound at the same time your phone's going off. It is actually really difficult, and just a personal vulnerability as well. I know I've been called out to campsites where there's been sick patients who are intoxicated or have taken drugs, and you feel scared, no doubt about it, and particularly as a female clinician. So these are the themes that come out that we think actually money can't solve those things. You actually need support, and there wouldn't be enough funding to provide that support of a co-worker or administrator.
Thanks for sharing that with us. We're going to solve this. I mean, we understand there is a problem. We understand that it's not going to go away. We are getting increased population. Communities feeling vulnerable. I'm just going to go around the table. I'm just going to ask what action that each of you believe you're going to personally take, or we should take collectively to strengthen service delivery around urgent after-hours care. You can keep clapping if you want, because it's quite nice to hear. Jono?
Firstly, I just want to acknowledge Fiona and the primary care team that have kept this going for so long. They've delivered over and above, and the town's got bigger, the needs have changed, and the system has become unsustainable. So absolutely, I've been in that situation, I understand it. I've sat in a lot of meetings. I've been campaigning for the last couple of years to get a solution to this. We are making progress, I believe.
What's going to get us over the line, John?
I think we need central funding and the powers that be further up the line. I'm not talking to the guys on the stage here, I'm talking to now what is a centralised decision making to recognise what has changed in this town. And so we need funding to deliver a system that has redundancy where it's not reliant on a sole practitioner overnight.
Thank you. David, the other question was, how are we going to resolve this and what are we going to do personally?
Yeah, so I think from a personal perspective as the Chief Medical Officer, this weighs heavily on my mind. I think John O and I have spoken about this on many occasions, and I think sometimes quite passionately. I think we both agree. We've been working towards processes to deliver the right kind of outcome, working with primary care, rural hospitals, PHO, commissioning. We effectively sit within the hospital and specialist services arm of the system. Personally, obviously, I have patients who are vulnerable, and so I'm very passionate about landing things, and it's important that the time frame that we give ourselves is not something which continues to be extended, because we've got through the summer period, but we will have the winter to come. It's the winter which I think really starts to make us feel much more vulnerable as a system, because we're worried about those distances that our patients are travelling.
Pull it to a close here. So you recommend something in place by June?
Look, I think the processes that we have been actively involved in, and that we have been trying to demonstrate a lot of leadership from a hospital specialist services perspective, acknowledging that wide core, absolutely we feel that something needs to be in place for winter.
And I know what you're going to pull on me, because you've got the English accent, you're going to pull the Northern Hemisphere summer or winter, rather, but we're talking Southern Hemisphere winter.
As a proud Kiwi citizen.
Get on. Fiona, what are we going to do? What can you do personally?
For us in primary care, we really want to focus on keeping that 6 to 11 service sustainable, because we know that's when we see the vast majority of after-hours consults, which are usually primary care type of consults rather than hospital level care. So we're really committed to helping sustain that.
Thank you very much, Hamish.
Look, we're going to continue to work with our commissioning colleagues who are in the audience tonight. These are the people that kind of fund those services, not hospital and specialist services, but really it's about a joined up approach from general practice all the way through to the hospital. So we're all keen to be active in this space.
And I hope those commissioning officials recognise that I put them in the front row for a reason. David Bailey.
Thank you. I think, like John, over the last 2 years, I've been involved in conversations around what we do with the after-hours service, and we'll continue to be involved in those conversations. I think currently and temporarily we are, unfortunately, the service that is covering the after-hours situation for those patients in need, and not actually managing that effectively at the moment.
And we appreciate you for that, David, and your team. I'm going to move now to a second theme tonight, which is accessibility to healthcare. 46% of the Upper Clutha residents who responded to the latest PHC Quality of Life survey said they needed to travel outside the district to access medical services. Almost 1 in 2, 46%. In the recent senior needs survey that Kate's team did, this increased to 61% of our seniors travelling outside the area for medical or dental services in the past year. 61%. Michael wrote to me, I have an illness that sometimes requires urgent blood tests. No phlebotomist available here, so we have to drive to Frankton Hospital Emergency Department and back at 2 in the morning. And huge frost, we have to drive to Invercargill ER in the middle of the night for other treatment. It's just a small part of my story. Another Michael, and I'll finish here, is our population continues to grow. Our population continues to grow, but there's many more services available in Timaru, which has a much smaller district population than Queensland Lakes, but has significantly better and faster access to the region's main hospitals, Christchurch, than we do into Dunedin Hospital. There's Michael Hinch. There's operations for Te Whātua Southern. Wānaka is growing significantly. It's matured. It's more sophisticated than it has been. Expectations of residents are high. Why is it still classified as a rural entity for healthcare purposes?
Yeah, look up. Am I on? Yeah, I'm on. Look, there's a number of classifications in terms of rurality that are used around the world. The Australians are very good at it. A lot of it's around driven around distance to large population centres or large facilities such as base hospitals. So we know that none of those fit accurately with the Queenstown Central Otago population, which is a number of increasingly high density areas that are aggregated together to a large population. So we're trying to change the language around that to say actually this is not a rural population, this is an urban population that's at distance from services.
So how do we deliver planned care versus urgent unplanned care? Well, how do we do that? What is Te Whātua working on to actually deliver to this?
So we're working on a lot of essentially better access to planned care and trying to get care much closer to where patients are. So a focus on outpatients, on diagnostics, and on what I would call ambulatory care, so infusions and chemotherapy, things that can occur close to home. We might be travelling regularly, and if people have to travel for an occasional illness or a complex operation, then for the time being, maybe that's okay as we continue to plan into the future.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you, but David Gow, what's the role of the Chief Medical Officer of the district in this particular aspect of concern?
I mean, to Hamish's point, and I would agree with the range of different elements that he described there. If we were to think about something like specialist appointments, something which I've been involved in for many years, it has become increasingly clear to me how innovative I need to be personally. So, offering telehealth solutions where they're available, working closely with our primary care colleagues to deliver care and advice alongside, making sure health pathways are adequate. Every now and again, it's crucially important to see someone in person to be able to do certain types of examinations. So there's definitely a role for in person, but where we can use telehealth, we should be encouraged to do so. One of the reasons why we can't always send a specialist out to an individual area of the district is because the resources that have flown through the southern system in terms of workforce have always been on the edge, and we certainly have had problems with small vulnerable clinical teams over the last couple of years. And so it's quite difficult sometimes to send somebody a long way away from the base hospital if they may be on call or they may have planned operations to do. So that's one of the reasons why I think, utilising telehealth in the best way that we can, and also trying to set up our systems so that if we were in a position to be able to aggregate appointments, reduce the number of visits that patients and whānau require. So absolutely, and my role, I guess, is to advocate for that with my colleagues and to explain the importance.
Thank you, David. Hamish, I'm going to ask you a question. I'll just get you to put your mic slightly closer to your mouth. What is is this an infrastructure solution? Is this bricks and mortar? Is this what's going to solve the problem?
No, I don't think it's initially about bricks and mortar. What I think it's about is about building services and about building a workforce to deliver those services. I think there needs to be some infrastructure planning that helps support some of that activity. We know we're going to need some increased outpatient facilities in Fredericton and potentially in Wānaka, for example. But it's not about building a big hospital immediately.
Wānaka's historical growth over the last 10 years. This is care of Andrew Howard. So our historical growth over 10 years has been roughly 6.2% per annum, amazing figures. KLDC is predicting 2.2% over the coming 10 years. If growth continues as we currently do, we're going to have 33,000 people in Wānaka in 2033. Yet, QLDC's figures are only expecting 23,000 by 2033. Howie, who's been on the school boards, he knows the Ministry of Education use these figures, and as soon as we build a new school, we're running out of room again, and so that forecasting is dreadful. Like, how is Te Whātua Ora not going to fall into that same trap that we've continually been in of underestimating population growth?
Yeah, so we use the Stats New Zealand predictions and projections, which are the most accurate data set that we've got. And obviously at census time, they check in to see how close they are. We have been caught, I think, on the back foot, particularly around the growth in Central Otago and Queenstown. And that's been challenging, and planning for this area should have occurred some years ago.
Encourage you to continue to be aware of that. We've also got that challenge of seasonal spikes. We can have up to 45,000 people on a Warbirds weekend, height of the ski season, stuff like that. How can a town like this, with its healthcare services, how can it deliver when it's suddenly got an influx of people? What are we doing about those seasonal spikes?
Yeah, look, I think that's a real challenge for this particular area, and another reason why it wouldn't be any classification as rural. Obviously with the high visitor numbers and being the international destination that it is. So, we plan around the system for seasonal surges across the South Island, in the cities and in the towns, and putting other resources in place, such as the telehealth and various other elements. But we put additional staff on in some of our EDs and on our wards as well.
David, I'm going to bring you, David Gow, I'm going to bring you back in here. I'm really, genuinely concerned about the ageing population and the Upper Cliff. There are the challenges that brings on, and I'm going to have a supplementary question here. But David, what challenges are you seeing about an ageing demographic within the Upper Cliff?
Well, when a population ages, the complexity of their medical needs increases, their ability to travel easily decreases. We're increasingly recognising all of the challenges that ageing, provides in a medical sense under the term of frailty. So frailty tends to go up in a community as it ages. And I think really, to your question, it's about all of what we're discussing is going to be amplified in that population, which we do recognise.
And it's going to be amplified because we're building 2 new retirement villages as well, one in 3 Parks and one out at North Lake. Now this is great because it says that it has hospital level care, but it's only got hospital level care to a certain point, and then that gets put out. So how are you planning? Are you looking ahead at what's happening with the demographic and the use of urban space and the design? of new communities here realise that, you know, it's not just this linear growth, that we're going to keep going with hockey stick type growth.
Yeah, so I think that certainly maintaining people in their own homes, or if that home is a care facility, is crucially important to the health system, because we know that once someone has come inside the health system, you know, through a hospital admission, that they're likely to, you know, potential risk of harm of being associated with their admission, and it can be challenging to get them back into their home environment. So at Dunedin Hospital currently we're working on a pilot of virtual integrated care with our primary care colleagues and our commissioning colleagues to look at where we can use innovative solutions through telehealth, enhanced home teams to try to sort of allow us to deliver more care in the community closer to the patient's home or facility.
Does telemedicine play a role in aged care facilities as well?
Absolutely. I mean, we've already heard from Fiona the telecare, the telehealth facility, that already exists. But what I'm probably talking about here would be sort of taking that a step further, perhaps connecting individual clinicians in the community, perhaps with decision-making support within the hospital system, to try to, you know, where possible, deliver that care without necessarily having for the patient to move into the hospital system formally if there's risk that stroke.
One last question for you, David G, before I throw it over to David B. Is it true that there is only one private rheumatologist in the entire southern region? Public rheumatologists are only seeing patients who are seriously unwell. What can be done about this specific situation in 20 seconds?
Thanks, Simon. So that's 10 seconds I've already wasted. So we've got 3.3 public FTE in rheumatology. Yes, it's true there is only one person who's doing private. We don't have any control over that. We're not, you know, trying to push that. But what I will say is we'll always look to work symbiotically with private care because it's a sensible solution. Through Health Pathways, our fantastic colleagues in primary care, the PHO support, we think we can manage those patients who do not have those significant needs, but I can understand it's frustrating when sometimes you want to have the opportunity to pay for a specialist, and that hasn't happened. And personally, for 5 seconds, I've reduced the number of private neurologists by 1 when I took on this role.
Yes, very quickly. Kudos to you. I'm going to come back onto that private-public challenge later on. And I'm going to come back onto that private-public challenge later on. And David Bailey, Michael asked, because we're talking about accessibility to healthcare, does their reliance on the transfers, which seem to be continually transferring to Dunstan or to Dunedin, or helicopters unable to fly due to weather conditions, etc.? I mean, are we putting our patients at risk, considering the amount of transfers we have to do?
I think I'll start with when the helicopters are able to fly, because that's pretty much the most extreme situation we can be presented with. So many years ago, an adverse event occurred. The manager who I report to, Pauline Buchanan, who's the district operations manager of South Otago, worked very hard to, with integrated model, to produce a new process with Dunedin ICU. So if we cannot fly a patient that needs ICU in Dunedin, the ICU team will picked up in a Dunedin ambulance and we'll start heading this way, and we'll bring the patient down, maybe via Dunstan Hospital as well, to meet that team and that team continue to care. So there's a process there.
And then just briefly, do we feel like, I mean, you have a stat which I find is really interesting, I think we can talk about this, is around, you always seem to be doing transfers, but isn't there this anomaly that the ambulance is only being used 30 or 40% of the time?
Yeah, so I guess we could talk about utilisation rates. The utilisation rate for the Wānaka ambulance is 21%, so that's the time from the ambulance receiving the call to the patient to then arriving at the patient, treating the patient and transporting the patient to destination. The time to the return is not counted in that, but just based on some figure crunching it on today, it would sit around 30%.
Okay, that's really interesting. Yeah, really interesting. It is, and last question before I throw it open to others, you know, there's a sense from some of the community that arranging an ambulance ride to Dunedin is a really big big deal and it's often only provided, reluctantly. Is that fair?
I can understand the perception it's making it work is the difficult bit. So the logistics around seeing an ambulance from Wānaka to Dunedin, we are strained by driving laws. People can't drive after 14 hours with 2 exemptions in place. So effectively we need to make a plan to move a patient from Wānaka to Dunedin that's using multiple ambulances. Someone like myself will be involved in that plan, so there's a fair bit of discussion to make that happen. Sending an ambulance from Wānaka to Dunedin is leaving the community uncovered for too long, and it's not a sustainable option.
I've got one last question to go around before we move on to the next theme, and that is, what's one thing you can commit to doing to help make healthcare more accessible to those living in Papakluta? 10 seconds, Jono.
Continue working to a solution for after 11 p.m. so the ambulance can stay in town overnight.
Thank you, David. Yeah.
Continuing to help provide leadership in that space, but also to promote telehealth amongst my colleagues.
Thank you, Fiona.
Like to think a bit beyond the temporary after hours solution and be starting to think about what a small hospital in Wānaka would look like.
I guess I'm planning for a small hospital. No, look, continue to focus on innovative care models so we can get care close to people at home.
And to continue working with our external health stakeholders for a better model.
Other than Fiona, there's a lot of continuation. Thank you, team. When you wake up from a great dream and you've won lotto or you've scored that match-winning World Cup goal, mine's when I wake up and I call the medical clinic and I get a doctor's appointment before Christmas. So I just want to sort of set the scene there that recently QLDC Quality of Life Survey said that 24% of people district-wide, so this is across Queenstown and Wānaka, said that the length of wait for GP appointments has stopped them seeing medical professionals. So that's 24%, that's up threefold in the last 3 years. When broken down, 32%, that was district-wide, 32% of Wānaka respondents said that there was a barrier to seeking medical professional help. Kate's senior needs survey, it increases to 47% for seniors. It's said as a barrier to accessing their local GP. It can take weeks to see your own doctor. Fiona, what's happening?
First of all, I'm going to be a bit of a stuck record. You can always see us on the day. So don't delay something that you think might be urgent just because you can't see an appointment on the patient portal. We're always accessible on the day and you can call us. No doubt, waits to GPs are up everywhere, and some of that is a nationwide problem. We see that quite a lot in recent press. There's a problem with GP recruitment, problems with training GPs or enough GPs, and problems with retaining GPs. It's probably not something that I can solve, and in fact in Wānaka we're really lucky. We can attract some really good GPs to the area. It's such a great place to live in. Rural general practice is fun, there's lots of variety. But on the other hand, for some people it's quite daunting work, and cost of living, as we all know, is quite high here. But I think we do quite well. There's an extra skill set that rural GPs need, so you can't necessarily be a freshly qualified GP and expect to cope really well. So it's something that we are looking at and recruiting.
Yeah, one of the ideas that's been floated by members of the community is that maybe we have a local medical centre that only sees enrolled patients, or the current one seeing enrolled patients, and visitors and casual patients go to another clinic in town staffed by locums. Is that viable?
It's something that both medical centres kind of do anyway. It's under one roof, it's not a separate location, but we very much have different streams for visitors than we do for our enrolled patients. So just because a waiting room looks busy and there's lots of visitors, that shouldn't impact on your day-to-day elective general practice consults. Thought of having it totally separate and the cost of extra rent and the replication of administration and reception wouldn't make that commercially viable option.
Carol? Hello, Carol. Do you want to say anything about this? Or you very good. Okay. How are we going, team? Is this being helpful at the moment? Thank you.
Are we allowed to ask questions at any stage?
No, you can't. No, you can. But what you can do is, yes, you can actually, because if you want to, Amanda, if you'd like to ask a question, you can just grab Cody or Lyle, and you can write that down. And thanks for prompting me, Amanda, also. If you'd like to have a question asked in the quick-fire session, yes, there. Carol, you changed your mind. Very good. Jump up on stage.
Simon, just while Carol's getting up, I'll jump in right there. You can't ask what the wait time is for GPs and put pressure on that, and at the same time ask them to do more overnight.
Yes. Yeah.
You can't have both,
Yes.
so something else needs to come into that space, and one or the other. The system is stretched; they can't do both.
Carol Eckmore, who's the clinical director at Well South, has joined us on the stage. I was tossing up whether to have Carol as part of the panel. I really wanted to, but something was going to become overload. So, Carol, what's your views on a couple of things we've talked about tonight about urgent care, and GP wait times?
Yeah, kia ora tātou. Thanks, Simon. And I just really wanted to back up what Fiona has been very eloquently expressing, that the workforce issues that she's describing are not unique here in Wānaka. And they're certainly across the whole country, and particularly in rural places. This is a problem we face as a nation, and the solutions we'll find by working together. And we're seeing the working together on the stage here, and I think that's how we're going to get ourselves through this space into better services for those that we love and ourselves in this community, as well as caring for visitors. So just really support Fiona's being speak.
Thank you.
In this.
Great. Thank you very much. So that was Carol from Well South, was an important funder within the healthcare system here, and we do appreciate you coming along and listening in as well. Fourth topic I've got of 7 is mental health, and I had a quite an emotional email from John. He wrote and said to me, mental health services in the district are very poor. There is no care, no investment and no resources. The mental health facilities at Dunstan sap the life out of you. I reached out to help in January multiple times, reached out for help, and was sent to the police on every occasion. The police are not trained healthcare workers. Mental health. Fiona, what are you seeing at the coalface regarding mental health here in the Upper Cleveland?
Well, firstly, I want to just express sympathy to John, and I don't know if he's my patient, but if he is, it'd be a really good opportunity to sit down with John or someone like him to talk through his experience. It's really important to be able to listen to the patients and their experience, because we often don't get that detail, and to be able to feed that back to the mental health services. We as GPs see a lot of mental health. It's every day, and I think we're often quite good at it, and we can manage quite more simple side of mental health. We're really lucky with Carol at Well South provides us with HIPs, and that's Health Improvement Practitioners. And we've also got Tatiana, who's Brief Intervention Services. These are both free for patients, and they're really effective at helping people with low to moderate depression and anxiety, and they do a really good job there. We've got the mental health team based in Dunstan. There's a locum consultant psychiatrist. We've got a really good nurse practitioner, Katie Wade, and they're excellent at seeing the higher end of mental health. In my experience, it's that middle ground that's actually really hard. People that have ongoing mental health needs, but they're not necessarily needing psychiatrist input. They might need a psychologist input. And we've got some great psychologists, psychotherapists in the area, but lots of them have waiting lists that are full. And they're also really expensive. To get to see a public clinical psychologist, I believe it's 6 to 12 months on a waiting list.
It's incredible, isn't it? Yeah,
that's not good enough at all.
Thank you, Fiona. And David, I'll just bring you David Bailey. Are you seeing, as a first responder, what are you seeing with regards to mental health in the community?
From a first responder point of view, I think we see the more extreme side of mental health and the role of an ambulance officer is to navigate the health sector to ensure that patient ends up in the right place with the best sort of support for them.
Thank you. Look, Hamish, I'm going to come across to you because there was an article in the media in May 23 that sort of showed a bit of an anomaly in the apportionment of health resources in Te Waipunamui, the South Island. The Dunedin district has one mental health staff member for every 443 people, but in Central Otago it's 1 for every 2,884. What are you seeing as the effects of this misallocation of the whare or as medical health resources?
Yeah, thank you. Look, just first thing to say is that we've got mental health teams located in Invercargill and in Dunedin that provide a lot of that sort of inpatient or complex mental health care, as well as community mental health teams that reside in both areas. There is an Upper Clutha or Clutha Lakes mental health team as well, and the big challenge that we have in mental health at the moment is that we have no workforce. That's not just Southern, that's across New Zealand and that's across all specialties.
But it seems to be a big discrepancy. I mean, can we not reapportion, reallocate, rehome some of those resources to make it slightly more equitable?
So we've just put some additional resources into that into the Central Lakes team, so they're recruiting at the moment, and then we've got a plan to lift the number of people in that team across the next few months should recruitment be successful. So the key thing to understand though is just that the workforce is a massive vulnerability here. Yeah. It's very hard to attract a clinical psychologist into the public service.
Because of the housing, cost of housing?
No, it's multifactorial. Often it's around pay rates and the fact that it's more attractive to be in private and some of the opportunities that come with that.
Okay. Thank you for sharing those insights around mental health. Moving on to the fifth of 7 or 8 is the cost of medical services in the Upper Clutha to Upper Clutha residents. And I'll stick with you, Hamish, if that's okay. That Shirley asked, why do Upper Clutha residents have to pay for a bunch of services which other New Zealanders do not? For example, radiology and screening services and blood tests. What would you say to Shirley?
Yeah, look, there's a lot of inequity across the system that's existed because of previous funding models that we haven't had the opportunity to unravel. When we looked at particularly around that blood test, people go to one of our Awanui contracted points, they can get obviously a free blood test, but if they go to the GP, then the GP intends to pay them there's a co-payment that goes along there. And that's fair and reasonable from the point of view of the practice in terms of its resource that they have to use, but we just haven't got to the point where we can streamline that and fix that across the whole system. But very much aware that there's inequity out there.
There is real inequity there. How about that inequity? Meredith is asking this around the dollar amount of allowances for patients having to travel to Dunedin for the care they need. We're hamstrung here. We can't provide it locally. We've got to travel.
Yeah.
And I think I heard a stat with, who was it? No, it was something else. $700 it costs for a whānau, for a family, to give up time to drive to Dunedin, to Otapoti, Dunedin, to have the appointment, to come back. $700. We're talking about equity here, and those, what's been done to improve those allowances? We're talking about equity here, and those, what's been done to improve those allowances?
Look, the National Travel Assistance Scheme is a central scheme that's been put in place to sort of manage costs for people travelling long distances for healthcare. The challenge around that though is that the people in Southern and the wider Southern District are the most exposed in the country. We've signalled for some time that that's not fit for purpose, either the process or the amount that people are being paid, given the distances that people are going and given the costs that they're incurring. There's a process underway where that's being reviewed centrally, and we're expecting some output from that soon.
The last thing I want to cover, and I'll pick it over to David Gow, and I signalled it in one of the previous things that we were talking about, is that, are we at risk in the Upper Clutha of having a privatised health service, and is that the way it's heading, and really increasing that disparity between those that can afford it and those that can't?
That's certainly not the intention from Te Whānaka that we end up with a privatised system. Being realistic, some people will access some elements of their care through the private system, and that's not necessarily something we should disencourage, because it's everybody's right to have that choice. But it's equally everybody's right to have the right kind of care delivered in the right environment, close to their home, and that is what we're striving to achieve. Noting that rurality that we have within the Southern District is our unique feature, but it's our job to continue to advocate in all the national forums where we find ourselves to make sure that the system does understand that, so that they don't think they're comparing apples with apples when looking at urban environments which are close to base hospitals and increasingly urban environments which are long distance from base hospitals.
In July 2022, Te Whātua Southern was, and I quote, delighted to announce the purchase of a new facility to house a primary birthing unit in Wānaka. I like this next little bit here that I threw together. Almost 2 years later, the unit still remains far from open. I biked past it today, and what should have been looking like a toddler starting to crawl instead resembled a bad case of first trimester morning sickness. How has this been allowed to happen, Hamish? What has gone on with this birthing unit?
Look, just want to acknowledge the incredible amount of frustration around this, and if I was being honest, I'm incredibly frustrated too. This is not the timeline that we would have wanted to deliver this on. When it was announced, it was exciting. We think it's very positive for the Wānaka community, but the pathway to that in terms of has been caught up in the change in the healthcare system, where it's delivered by an infrastructure partner now, some of the complexity around approvals for that, and also anyone that's built anything recently will understand that it's a particularly challenging time, and it's more so from the public sector side of things. But look, completely agree. It is going to open, and the spring.
Hamish, what date are you cutting the ribbon, mate?
I've been told spring, but I'm not allowed to give any other details.
I will be shocked if I say more than spring, okay? And I noticed we didn't append a year to the spring. Okay, Dunstan Hospital. Jono, there's been a number of questions about Dunstan. Is Dunstan a fully funded hospital, public hospital?
There's a number of parts to that, of course. Is Dunstan a public hospital? Dunstan is a community-owned trust hospital. So from the point of view of the public, the public of the Upper Clutha, the Alexandra and Cromwell Basins own Dunstan Hospital. It is roughly 80% funded by Te Whātua, Health New Zealand. But the long and short of it is, of course, that's not enough. There's not enough money in healthcare as it is. But I think as a community trust, we are explicitly vulnerable to these funding models. We get some revenue from ACC, we get some revenue from Well South to provide primary care after hours for enrolled patients in the Alexandra and Cromwell areas. We do not get any funding to provide after hours care for Wānaka patients, unfortunately.
Actually, sorry, can I just jump in? What percentage of your patients to Dunstan Hospital come from the Upper Clutha?
40% from the Wānaka.
It's as if I knew the answer to the question I just asked. John, keep going.
So, yes, look, funding is a big issue. Our hospital is a trust. We can't run out of funds, or we have to close the door. We're in deficit, and we've had, historically, for the last 5 years, have been unable to pay our staff the same rates as they would get at a public hospital, or a funded hospital.
I think we're clapping to the disappointment of that, not at the actual that happening. Hamish, why is Dunstan Hospital not fully funded by Te Whātua?
So there's a lot of history that sits in behind that in terms of, I believe, when a particular government decided to back out of community hospitals, and the communities rallied together and a number of trusts formed. That was particularly evident across Southern, and there's a number of models around that, Waitaki, Gore, Dunstan and Maniatoto. So at the time they were funded on what's called a price volume schedule, so volumes that they were seeing at the time, and a lot of that made sense, but a lot of that funding hasn't kept pace with the growth that we've seen in the region, or the change in services. And clearly there are challenges around how that business operates as an entity as well, as John
just one other question around Dunstan Hospital, and this comes from Simon, no relation. My father needed weekly transfusions for bone marrow issue, but had to wait until his haemoglobin levels were so low that he could hardly walk before he was being able to be sent to Dunstan, often by ambulance, for a transfusion. GPs can only send patients to Dunstan when they are almost in a critical state, Simon says, rather than to schedule them. So John, I mean, there was a very fair, I thought, question from Simon about how proactive patient management and coordination between Dunstan and the GPs could be improved.
I think we're working on that really hard at the moment. I acknowledge this is an issue. We were short roughly 1/3 of our nursing force over the last 2 years. We've had to close beds. We've had to manage really carefully the patients that can come into the hospital, and getting that balance of planned care versus emergent care right to make sure we can look after the sickest was a struggle. We've recently put in place a trial acute access clinic that aims to solve this sort of problem, and that's exactly so we can be a bit proactive and get these sort of patients down earlier, so we don't result in them coming in as an emergency in the middle of the night and relying on David Bailey's team.
Well, we'd encourage you all to keep being innovative in that space, because it is really a concern. James, I'll get you to come up on the stage now if you like, and Lyle and Cody, if you've got any questions for me, we'll be moving into the quick fire session. Okay, we've got two choices. Either you can all go home and have your Milo and your cookies, because I said it would finish at 8 o'clock and it's 8 o'clock now, or you spend another 10 minutes having some Q&A. How about 10 minutes?
15.
Good, yeah. I feel like I'm at an auction. Anyone want to go above half an hour? Stick with probably 10 minutes to be perfectly honest. Okay. The first question is, why is our MP not here? And I can answer that. He was invited, but he declined to. No, he didn't decline to attend. He said he was unable to attend. What is the population number you are currently assessing our needs against for summer or winter number? So, Hamish, you might be a little bit specific, or does anyone know sort of what that peak number we're actually doing health service provision for?
So I think the population base at this stage is around 75,000, and then it surges up to 100,000 over the summer. QLDC's got quite a lot of visitor data, which is quite helpful for us to sort of augment that data set in terms of the Stats New Zealand.
Thank you. Lyle was busy saying to me, hopefully I get this right, Lyle, is that when I quoted Howie's 2.2% number, as in the population growth, you're saying that that's actually household growth rather than population growth?
Yeah, that's household growth, not the numbers of people, that's the number of houses.
Thank you very much. So I just wanted to correct that the QIDC's numbers around growth, the 2.2% is household growth, not per capita growth. Do you think the cost of after-hours GP care is fair? Can be several $100s. My wife and I can actually speak to that, because my mother was treated after hours about 6 weeks ago for a cardiac event, and we got invoiced $1,020. Do you think that's fair? Sorry, it's not you. Is it fair? Yeah.
No, it's not fair.
Do I get a refund?
It's not fair, and it's the problem that we've talked about briefly is it's not fair, this inequity that we see with Wānaka patients paying more when if they were in Dunedin they'd walk into ED and that would all be for free. And the money needs to follow the patient, and Carol at Well South is coming up with really good plans, and I think it will improve that funding. There's potentially going to be packages of care which for people that come in, and it would be a hospital type presentation that you would normally go to ED with. There would hopefully be money that would go towards the clinician time, so doctor time, nurse time, the blood tests that you need, the ECGs, the time to monitor, because that does add up, and it's not something that we can do for free in our service, but it is fair. It's not fair to our population.
you. Amanda's asked, and Dave or Hamish, you might want to, David or Hamish, are there other innovative solutions apart from telehealth and enhanced home teams to keep hospital admissions down? Is there anything else on that radar that we're thinking about? How to, as you said, Hamish, or to stop the hospital admissions?
I would guess that in terms of hospital admissions, I was talking about frailty earlier on. So, there's a frailty group which is meeting to try to look at all of those elements of how we can reduce unnecessary hospital admissions. I think to the point that Fiona's just making as well, that I think adequately funded primary care services is probably the most important piece of the jigsaw, and acknowledging that is complex and that is a nationwide issue, but services where they can be delivered in a timely manner to the highest possible standard is the most effective way of reducing unnecessary hospital admissions.
We've got 5 more minutes. What is the working relationship currently between public and private hospitals? Do you want to elaborate? You sort of encouraged that to happen. I almost got the sense, David, that you thought that one more person going to a private hospital takes pressure off the public system.
I mean, that's a simplistic way of looking at it.
Pretty simple.
So if you look at the healthcare resources that we have in the Southern District, they're not adequate enough for us to be able to deliver the planned care that we need to do to keep our waiting lists at a reasonable level. We use a lot of outplacing and outsourcing to our private facilities, and to be honest with you, if there were more, we probably would use more. But one of the major determinants that stops us in that space is workforce. So I think that it's very attractive to think about working closely with private providers. The one thing that I think we have to be clear about, though, is about making sure that healthcare is available to all. So the focus has to be on sustainable public care, but it is sensible to work closely with private providers to try to utilise that relationship to the benefit of the community. And again, one of the issues that perhaps I think about when I hear about developments is just how are we going to staff them with the workforce shortages that we see across the system. So I think anything that we can do that benefits the whole system is the right way forward, and I think we need to be mature enough to take advantages of where they offer themselves.
Thank you, David. I have a question here. I'm going to leave it as a rhetorical world because we're not going to solve this with the panel here. In a perfect world, if we had increased health service and health workers, where would they live? And I know you're laughing, but I hope you're laughing at irony, because that is the biggest challenge, that we can continue to do these health, that if we don't solve the housing affordability challenge, we're not going to be able to service these new health, the health service provision. And I know it's something the council was taking very seriously, but we really need a solution there. A couple more questions. When Greymouth recently opened a new hospital with anaesthetic, surgery and emergency care doctors for a population of 67,000. Greymouth, 67,000 population. West Coast. Jeez, I was suddenly, last time I drove through Greymouth. Don't know where they're all hiding. Why can't the Upper Clutha, Queenstown and Alexandra and Central Otago justify a similar facility? So it is coming back to that. I know we've sort of avoided the big hospital sort of conversation here, because I know it's happening at pay grade far greater than our own. But what would you say to that, Hamish? Hamish?
Yeah, look, actually, I guess it was a replacement of an existing facility that had sat there from a historical point in time. The hospital that they built was significantly smaller than the replacement one, or the one that they replaced as well. That said, it is actually a lovely facility. And I guess the challenge around that hospital is where is it located, how is it staffed, how is it paid for. We know, and I'm sure everyone is all aware of the challenges around the timeline with the new Dunedin hospital and how long it takes to get something out of the ground. So what we need to do is focus on service provision today while we plan what the future looks like.
Appreciate that. Look, I'm going to bring it to end. There was a number of other questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them, but we are coming up hard against time. So, final question I'm going to ask everybody on the panel is, and it's another go through, and hopefully you have a chance to think this through. Based on our discussions this evening, what's one tangible thing you will commit to do now to improve the provision of healthcare services in the Upper Clutha? I'm going to start with David Bailey this time, so that gives John time to think. What's one thing that we're going to do now, David?
To maintain our current service provision and keep working with external stakeholders.
Hamish?
Oh, look, we're well engaged with a number of parties around solutions for the Upper Clutha, so we'll continue to forge on around that, and I think we can get to a good space.
If I do a really long sentence, maybe.
Yeah, one breath doing it. So
Okay. Continue to do our day job in the 6 to 11 well, and continue to regularly assess capacity and staffing levels to adjust with our patient populations, and continue to work with Dunstan and Te Whatu Ora on both the short and the longer term after hours solutions, and continue to advocate strongly for our patients here in Wānaka to have fair access to funded healthcare.
To continue to be noisy, passionate, to advocate, and also to provide the offer to come back and talk to you all again. Thank you for coming. It's been great to have your feedback. Without your feedback, we're not going to be able to shape things going forward for the future. And one final point, just a thank you to the people that you have working regularly in this challenging environment. They're doing an amazing job, and their commitment to healthcare for this district is amazing. And also a shout out to the staff that we have from Te Whatu Ora in the region as well, that also want to just sort of acknowledge the hard work that they put in on a day-to-day basis.
Sure, thank you, David. Jono?
To make sure we have a mode for the community voice, that all these people have turned up tonight, and I will continue to pass that up the line and drag my colleagues up from Dunedin to listen. And I think we've got a chance to move forward with some very cross-system innovative solutions as to how we service the region.
Cool. Keep pushing for that urgent healthcare. I just encourage you all to really take that as the way that we can get that sorted by winter 2023 Southern Hemisphere, 2024 Southern Hemisphere time. That will be.
I have a feeling that might have stuck somewhere in the narrative from tonight.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's good. I can't bang on about it too much, David. That's it, folks. Let's give a big round of applause and thank you for. Just want to briefly introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Simon. I represent the Gordon family. The Gordon family have been in the Wānaka region for over 70 years, in actual fact. Involved traditionally in farming in the region, and more recently been involved with aged care. They are involved with the Aspiring Lifestyle Retirement Village, and also the Aspiring and Enliven Care Centre.
Do you want to just drop there so I can have this? Tell me about the development that you've got. I understand there's a piece of land adjacent to, across the road from the medical centre. What have you got planned for that?
Sure. So the piece of land sits alongside the Wānaka Lakes Health Centre on the corner of Avalon Station Drive and Cadrona Valley Road.
Yep.
So the intention is that we want to develop that into a health hub, which we think makes a lot of common sense given the fact that there's already the Wānaka Lakes Health Centre alongside. There's also the Aspiring Enliven Care Centre, and we think that rather than spreading health services across Wānaka, it makes sense to have a centralised hub that can serve that purpose.
Interesting. Okay, and so what, in a practical sense, what would be there, or what do you envisage? What health services? What would that provision be?
Sure. Well, we think clearly at the moment there's a number of services that Wānaka needs in the immediate term. I think as a family we also obviously look longer term. So the idea is that basically we've lodged building consent in the last couple of days. So we're ready to go. We've got a design team in place, a project team in place. I've got some renders up here which I can put on the front of the stage so you can see at the end of this evening. So the intention is that we want to develop health services in the Upper Clutha region with a focus on the medium to long term.
Fantastic. And so that would be sort of day surgery stuff you could imagine going into there?
Yeah, absolutely. We're already in discussions with a couple of potential tenants, one being a day surgery.
Yep.
But I would say that I would love to think that the Gordon family down the track could also be involved in a satellite small hospital that can assist Dunstan.
Fantastic. Okay. Thank you, James. that there is some initiatives. It's not, I wouldn't say doom and gloom, because I know these guys are working really hard as well, but there is some practical things that are happening as well. And I understand that the health precinct in 3 parks, you might have seen the billboard that's been up there for some time. I understand that they'll be making a reasonably substantive announcement in the next month or so. Right, we're going off peace and free will, and who knows what's going on with you out there. And they did set themselves up for a challenging evening, and I think it's been courteous. I appreciate the questions that have been asked. Hope we've got a good balance between sort of pressuring but being respectful as well. I'm aware that some members of the community are considering forming a group to campaign for better healthcare for our community. If you'd like to be kept informed about that and those developments, please leave your details with Monique and Lucy in the foyer on your way out. Again, I'm Simon Telford, Chair of the Community Board. Kia ora, and keep coming on.